Gotcha. All right, Mr. Mearls, it looks like we are live. So,
Cool.
yeah, everybody should be able to hear us this week.
Yeah, hopefully.
I'm sure I'll find out in probably the first
Yeah.
20 to 30 seconds.
Keep an
So,
eye on the chat.
oh, for sure, that definitely will be. All right. So there we are.
All right.
Looks like everything is working good.
Smooth sailing.
Yeah. Everybody says, "Dude, I can hear him."
It actually wasn't a technical problem last time. I just didn't have my voice, and no one had the heart to tell me. So
Actually, we were trolling you guys. I mean,
Yeah.
it was just part of the master plan that we kind of postpone everything for another week. So, but anyways, I'd like to thank. My name is David, and I do a lot of 4th edition games, and also we'll be doing a lot of D&D 5th edition games here on Twitch for the virtual tabletop community. And tonight's very, very special guest is Mr. Mike Mearls of Wizards of the Coast, and he's
Hey,
going to be
everyone.
hanging out with us for about the next 25-30 minutes, talking to us about the great new 5th edition that's coming out. And actually, in a week. We
Yeah.
have a week for the starter set, so
Yep.
I know everybody's excited. And to break the ice a little bit, well, why don't you tell us a little bit about your first Dungeons and Dragon experience?
Sure. Yeah, and I just trust we kind of. I mean, since you could hear me last time, I thought maybe if I told a completely different story, right? Just to every time people ask me. So no. So I started D&D. It's about 1981 with the 1978 basic set. My older brother had it. He played with some of his friends in Boy Scouts, and then he kind of got a little too old for it. His friends kind of stopped playing, so I inherited that set from him. And I kind of understood the basics of the game, but we didn't really understand. I didn't understand the rules very well, and neither did my friends. So we kind of played D&D, but it really wasn't until like I was like 10 or 11 that, because I was 6 in 1981, that we really understood the game and actually started playing it in a way you could recognize as like we're actually playing D&D and not just like whacking each other with sticks that were pretending were swords. So and so from there we played basic D&D, then went on to AD&D, and then 2nd edition and other games from there. So I've been playing for basically almost my entire life.
Awesome. Yeah, same here. I started playing with a bunch of kids that I just transferred to a new school, and I saw a bunch of kids always fake sword fighting and jumping off of the jungle bars and everything. And I ran over and I asked them, I said, I was a new kid to the school, and I said, "What are you guys doing?" They're playing D&D. So they started whipping out their little character sheets, and with the shield drawn and the AC and everything was stick figures, and that's been 1984. And ever since then, I've been playing, and I started in Classic as well, and I actually played in the same Classic game with my friends up until about 1997 or so, when we made it to level 31. We didn't quite make it to immortal status, but we gave it a go. But we converted a lot of... Second was big out at the time, so we converted, the Undermountain box set, a lot of Ravenloft stuff, so we did delve into the Forgotten Realms, because, there was Mistar and Hollow World, but there you go. There's my little story as well. So we know we've got a week till Dungeons and Dragons comes out with 5th edition. I mean, we've definitely been looking forward to this, and a lot of the viewers and a lot of the people enjoy 4th edition, and there's been a mix emotion of 4th edition. So, in your words, what does 5th edition bring to the table for maybe a returning player for D&D, or to entice a new player to get them to pick up that Dungeons and Dragons box set instead of the Star Wars Age of Rebellion box set or the Pathfinder box set?
Yeah, so there's a couple things that we're doing. The biggest one is we're taking the rules you need to play and making the basic level of rules as simple as possible. So if if you haven't played D&D before, you're coming back after a long time away, we want the rules to be very compact, easy to learn, and very easy to use and play. And that extends both to the DMs, both in terms of monsters you're running and everything, and then for players, the characters, each character class, tries to have a range of options that go from very simple, like the fighter, where you can just have a fighter who just swings a sword again and again each round, to a more complex option you can decide to take, and that this would be something in the player's handbook rather than the starter set, but where you have more like maneuvers and at-will abilities that look more like, say, 4th edition or like late 3rd edition characters. Okay. And then on top of that, with a starter set, in the past when we've done starters, they've really been kind of sets where it teaches you the basics of the rules, but then it kind of leaves you on your own. So what we're doing with this starter set it's basically a campaign that goes from levels 1 to 5 with just enough rules and pre-gen characters for you to play through the campaign in its entirety. So you're not just getting kind of like a 1 or 2 session experience, then now you're off on your own. It's really meant to get a group playing for a few levels, playing for like 6, 7, or 8 sessions. So you're really into the game, you've had a chance to get used to it, learn the rules, get a good story going with your campaign, and then you can expand like by the Tyranny of Dragons adventures or the Player's Handbook or the DMG or whatnot. So it's really aimed at saying like, what's the best part about D&D? It's like playing a campaign and kind of having a lot more choices rather than a very scripted adventure. In the starter set, like the first session is kind of scripted, it sort of teaches you the rules and gets you going. But then very quickly, the players have a lot of options for different dungeons they want to explore, different quests they want to take up, different NPCs they want to ally with. It's really meant to be kind of it's a sandbox, but with just enough pointers that, especially if you're using the pre-gen characters, you have like a good idea. Like, well, I'm playing this fighter whose kind of personal quest is to reclaim this village that got overrun by monsters. So all things being equal, if I'm not sure what to do next, I can try to think, well, I want to try to I want to get this quest going. It's my character's goal, and move it from there. So we really wanted to feel like with a starter set that you were just really make it feel like an adventure that you could buy, anyone would buy. Even if you're playing D&D haven't played before or for 5 years or 10 years, it's an adventure that just feels like, it's just an adventure with just enough rules to get me going.
Okay.
And I think that's one of the really big changes that we're doing with the starter set. Rather than make it something where like you might play for 1 or 2 sessions, it really gives you like a couple months of gameplay.
Very good. Now, about the starter box set, we watched the unveiling of it several days ago. It was very exciting. Now, I did notice one thing. There was no, usually in in the 4E starter box set and also the red box essential set, there were tokens. There were a large fold-out map. Is there a reason why there wasn't like tokens put in for the new box set and like a double-sided fold-out mount?
So there's a couple of reasons why we didn't go with that, because we talked about would we want a poster map and all, and exactly that stuff. But to start with, part of making the rules simpler was this idea of embracing the theater of the mind approach to combat, where the DM is really just explaining things, and rather than using a grid. The grid inherently makes combat a little more complex. Like, it's clearer because you can see where everything is. Mm-hmm. But then the rules for like, well, how do I move? It starts feeling more like a board game, and players kind of expect the rules to be a little denser than they otherwise could be. So that was one part of it. We wanted to keep the combat as simple as possible. We also kind of philosophically wanted, we had this idea in 5th edition of there's like 3 pillars of D&D. There's exploration, there's combat, and there's interaction. And one of the things we've done with the starter set adventure is almost every dungeon or like side quest or adventure, with a couple exceptions, but almost all of them don't require combat. Like, you can fight your way through them, but there's ideas like, well, if you want to disguise yourself as members of this bandit gang, what happens when you try to infiltrate their camp? Here's an NPC, might be like an evil wizard, but he doesn't really have any ill intent toward like the village where the characters are starting. He's here searching for this item, like a lost history book that he was supposed to be in this ruined castle. So you could fight him if you wanted to, but if you try to talk to him, he might try to hire you to help him out or defend his camp while he's exploring these ruins. So we kind of one of the things we noticed was when you're playing D&D for the first time, if the first thing a player sees is the battle map and markers, players kind of naturally just start to think of combat. And that's fine, if that's your DMing style, you're like, that's totally fine. But we didn't want to prejudice people coming in and have them think, oh, okay, we're supposed to fight. We wanted to think of it more like, oh, we could fight, but we don't have to. We can we can try to come up with a different plan or trick someone or role play and things like that. So that was kind of like the 2 sides of it, was both the rules and then this idea of really emphasizing, it's not just a game of fighting. There's other ways you can approach it, just depending on how you want to tackle problems.
Okay, very good, very good. Now about the setting, I guess the primary campaign setting for 5th edition is going to be the Forgotten Realms. I would take it probably the Sword Coast again.
Yep.
Now, we all love the Sword Coast. We all love the Forgotten Realms. Now, can you elaborate a little bit more on maybe is there going to be some more focal points within the Forgotten Realms besides just the Sword Coast? Maybe will there be a Greyhawk setting or an Intervale setting for 5th edition? I know that the 1014 playtest pack had the Kender for Dragonlance, the Warforged for Eberron. Now, can you elaborate a little bit more? Can you tell us a little bit more about the campaign settings in the future?
Yeah, so I can't go into any product details. We haven't announced anything yet.
Yeah.
But I do know in the player's handbook, for instance, we have details on the pantheons for Greyhawk, for Dragonlance, obviously for Forgotten Realms. We have a couple of the mythic Earth pantheons, like the Norse deities, the Celtic gods, Egyptian gods. And so the idea is within the core rulebooks, we're trying to cast a fairly wide net. Now with the adventures, we are using the realms for the adventure for the starter set. I mean, we had to pick a setting, especially for new players. They don't have their own campaign yet. But so the idea is we really want to be broad with that because we know, most DMs make up their own worlds. The realms is our most popular campaign setting, but we know we have significant numbers of people who like playing the other worlds. There's some support for them in the DMG. I believe we will have like the Kender and Warforged as examples of races and how you can create new races or modify them to kind of give your campaign some flavor. So we don't have anything to announce right now, but we know people like those campaign settings, and we definitely want to make sure that people can convert either existing campaigns or launch new ones.
Very good.
So, but for right now, we're really focused on the realms and focused on launching the game, trying to keep things simple to start with.
No new spoilers for us, huh? So about the classes, we also know in the 1014, the last public playtest pack, there was feats were an optional rule. Were the feats actually mechanized into the core mechanics of the classes, or are the feats still going to be an optional? You were talking about combat maneuvers and things like that. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Okay.
Yeah. So with feats, they're still optional. But one of the things we tried to do, so like with maneuvers in the fighter, you can choose to be a champion, which is the fairly straightforward fighter. You get to make this choice at 3rd level. Or you can choose, and now I'm totally blanking on the name. I think it's Weapon Master, but Battle Master. Battle Master, yeah. And that's the fighter that unlocks maneuvers for you.
Okay.
So we tried to always think in terms of the classes. Like, we always had to assume you weren't using feats. So we didn't want to have a class that felt like, well, this class is okay, but it's kind of half-baked unless you add feats to it. So we always had to make sure that if there's an option that wasn't being delivered by a feat, it had to be something that existed in the class. Now, some of the feats do sort of replicate class features, but those are more intended, like, let's say you're playing a fighter and you want to have some magical ability, but you don't want to multi-class. You might take a feat that gives you the ability to cast a few minor spells. Okay. Or vice versa. You're the wizard and you want to be really good with a bow, you might take a feat that makes you a good archer, so things like that.
Yeah, we had seen the different adepts and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the idea is like feats are kind of like a midpoint between not having multi-classing and then adding multi-classing to your game. And then they also give you things like one of the characters I'm playing now has the lucky feat, because basically he's a worshiper of this god of chaos, and that felt like, okay, that's an interesting way. Even though he's a wizard, he's this kind of chaos guy. Yeah. It felt like a good way to reflect him.
So one of your spoilers that you let out last week was the nice, I think it was a 1D 100 chart for the Warlock. Now, I believe it was Wild Magic. Can you tell us a little bit about okay, the Sorcerer. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so, actually, I will, give me a second. I don't know why I didn't think to open this earlier. I actually have a PDF of the player's handbook on my computer.
Ah.
So if I kind of start looking off into space rather than the camera, it's not because I'm just...
Oh, no problem. Just feel free to email that to me so we can start, using that in my 5e game, so...
So the idea is... Where is it? Oh, here we go. I have to shrink it. Sorry. But with the Wild Magic, the Sorcerer gets as a basic class feature, gets a pool of sorcery points. that when you cast a spell, you can use to augment the spell in some way. Kind of like meta magic from 3E. And then you can also spend those points to get extra spell slots, so you can cast more spells. The Wild Mage, I believe, I'm going to say it and I'll be wrong, and I'll have to correct myself as I flip through this PDF. But I believe the way the Wild Sorcerer works is if you spend sorcery points to augment a spell, you have to roll a die to see if you get a Wild Magic Surge.
Nice.
And if you get a Surge, yeah, that's when you roll on that D100 chart. So it's one of the things where if you want to pump up one of your spells, you're kind of taking a little bit of a risk.
It's the roll that brings drama into your game.
Exactly. And the kind of fun thing too is, I mean, some of the benefits, like some of the effects of the table actually help you. So you might decide to burn a sorcery point because you're hoping you get lucky on that die roll. Here, actually, I'm finally at the page. So yeah, the other sorcerer option is draconic magic. So if you want to be a dragon sorcerer. So yeah, so when you let's see, okay, here we go. No, so actually no, I am sorry. See, I knew I had that wrong. I knew I was quoting an earlier version of it. It's whenever you cast a spell, you roll a d20. If you roll a 1, then you roll a d100 to see what actually just happens. So it's something that's always there. Now, the also kind of cool thing is there's an option where if you want, you can give yourself the chance to basically alter luck around you, basically like, the strands of fate. And that's this kind of thing where you can alter a die roll, but what happens is then the DM kind of gets this option to then give you a taste of bad luck later on to balance it out. So there's basically this sort of give and take for the Wild Mage. You might get cool stuff, you might get bad stuff.
Very nice.
So that's the real strong theme there.
Very nice. You guys heard it here. That's pretty awesome. So with are there going to be any kind of, we know that you're going to be coming out with Tyranny of Dragons and the encounters and the epics, and is there going to be any plan to maybe come out with some virtual tabletop goodies for us virtual tabletop players, like as in a Roll20?
Yeah, so to start with, for organized play, we're going to have any adventure that we publish is legal for organized play. So we'll have the Tyranny of Dragons adventures, and then the adventure for the starter set. Now, one of the kind of things we're kind of wrestling with is with the adventures that we're creating, the expeditions, especially the 4-hour organized play adventures. We're distributing those for free, and so the idea is, since they're free, we want to try to encourage people to go to stores to play them. Correct. So that's where we're starting with. I kind of feeling is starting off a little more on the restrictive side, because we know stores are the ones they're giving space for people to come in and play. Right. It's a good hub for the local network of players. We know stores that have a lot of in-store play. If there's a city with stores that are supporting it, we see an uptick in popularity of the game. So to start with, that's we kind of want to become like our baseline rate, and then depending on what we're seeing for online play, we can grow from there. We can see how we want to expand things. But since it's a very new thing for us, people have been playing online, especially on forums, for a while. But now with virtual tables becoming more popular, we just have to gauge how can we balance the desires of players who want to play online versus stores who are getting people to come out to the store to form that community. Yeah. But we also recognize online players, that is also a really big community.
It's massive.
Yeah, there's a lot of people playing. Yeah. So I think for us, it's going to be a little bit of a balancing act. Just to see where are things going, how many people are playing online, how are the stores reacting, because that's another thing too is we haven't really offered this before. So will stores really embrace the idea of these 4-hour sessions with the expeditions, or is that something where they just feel comfortable just with encounters and they they don't want much more from there? Then how does that interact with conventions? Which again, kind of like stores, it's something that it's a good catalyst for the local community. So we'll probably in say 6 months after launch, sit down and take a look where things are going, and then see what our next step will be from there. But it's definitely something which we know is important. We definitely want to engage people.
Yeah, because I know that Roll20, back when they had their latest Data Delve update, I believe it was May 28th, they actually they announced that they hit 500,000 users, which is, that's a phenomenal number for the online virtual tabletop community. And it is really, it's honestly going to do nothing but grow. So,
yeah, exactly.
All right, so speaking about online things, you guys have the D&D Insider. Now, the D&D Insider does support D&D Essentials. It does. I'm starting to have a thunderstorm here, which is I'm sure you can probably hear it thundering in the background. You have the Essentials character maker, the 4E database. Is there any plans to update that for 5th edition? And when can we start to see Dungeon and Dragon magazines starting to be produced again?
So we don't have any announcements yet for the magazines. That's still something we're working on. So it's a little too early to start talking about them. With the tools, what we're doing is the 4th edition tools we're going to continue to make available, for subscription, as long as people are playing 4E and there's enough people subscribing that we can keep the lights on. But rather than add 5th edition to the tools, because in a lot of ways, a lot of feedback we get for the 4E tools for DDI is people want it like on their tablets, they want it on their smartphones. That system, when it was built, was really built for PC use right from the beginning. So rather than try to kind of go back and retrofit it, we're partnering with a company called Trapdoor Technologies, and they're working on something called Project Morningstar. That's the code name for it for now. It's not the final name. And that's a set of tools that will be usable online. It's aimed at tablets. They had demos at the Origins game convention a couple weeks ago, where we was using an iPad to run the app. So it's really, it's about hitting the platforms people are using, the devices, and building something that's a little more integrated into how people are using digital content these days. Okay. So I know, like with the DDI tools, like they use Silverlight. There's a few barriers really just couldn't overcome in trying to bring them onto other platforms, and then the amount of recoding for different rules engines. So, but we know plenty of 4E fans. People are still playing 4E. They're still using the tools. So we're all for keeping those running. As long as people want to subscribe, we'll keep them running.
Definitely. So. All right, to talk a little bit more. Ooh, the lights are dimming down. This is part of the the RP part of our interview here. Now, the Dungeon Monster creation that you have slated for 5th edition, you haven't really gone into a whole lot of detail. Now, can you elaborate a little bit more on these charts that you're talking about, and will the monsters have formulas like in 4E? That's exactly the intent.
Okay. So it's not quite as formulaic. Like I know in 4E you kind of had baseline values, and you'd add the level to it, and then there's a modifier for roll. Instead, what we're going to have, there's 2 ways. I mean, we basically decided we kind of have our cake and eat it too. So if you want to make monsters in the 3rd edition way, which was you kind of picked your stats, picked your hit dice, added abilities, and then at the end you sort of judged what the challenge rating was. You can do it that way. Okay. The opposite way you can do is you can start by picking. Now we're using challenge rating again, though it's different than it was in 3. I'll describe that in a second, but we'll have a table in the DMG that gives you sample stats by challenge rating. So you can think, okay, my party's 5th level. I want them to fight a really tough monster. This probably maybe a creature that's going to be on its own. So I'll go for a CR7 creature. You get your baseline stats, and then you can go, okay, I'm going to add these couple abilities, and then I'm good to go. Okay. So it's trying to sort of basically the table with the stats. That's where you'd go. Like let's say if you create the monster from scratch, you take those stats and compare them to the table, and then find the best fit for the CR. Or you can just start with the table. Okay. Now. A shift from 4th to 5th is with challenge rating. It's a little bit like it was in 3rd, where we're saying a creature of a given challenge rating is kind of meant to fight on its own. Well, it's not quite this. It's more the challenge rating says if your party is this level or higher, they'll it's a pretty good match. Like this is a creature that they could fight without being necessarily overwhelmed. But then each creature has an XP value, and just like in 4th edition, you have your XP budget, and you can just spend it that way. Gotcha. So a good way to think of it for encounter building would be, let's say you have a 3rd level party. You would know, okay, I have a 3rd level party, here's my XP budget, I'll just look at monsters CR3 and below, and then spend my budget from there. Okay. So, and you can do that for an adventure or for each encounter, depending on the pace you're shooting for in your game.
And will all of the, if you have a list of powers, will they be universal for any type of, will you have that power, magic missile for the skeleton, or will you have, any kind of force magic or any kind of wild magic for maybe the ogre or something like that?
Yeah. It's a little more freeform. Your best bet would be to use existing abilities from monsters. We'll have some guidelines for if you want to use a spell. But in general, what we've done with most of the monsters is kind of like in 4th, rather than using a spell, unless the creature's an actual spellcaster, it's meant to be this is a monster that knows spells and casts them. We've tried to use unique abilities. So the Beholder, for instance, its eye rays just explain what happens when it zaps you with it, rather than saying, oh, it's like this just uses the rules to charm monster. It's more, no, this is what you make the saving throw, and here's the effect if you fail. So it's meant to be a little easier to run. If you have a stat block in front of you, you don't really have to refer it anywhere else.
So does it make it planning a lot easier for a dungeon master instead of going through hordes and hordes of skills and?
Oh yeah. There's no.
That's
feats.
What it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you don't have to worry about feats. You don't have to worry about skill ranks or anything like that. Really, even if you're doing it from scratch, the kind of long way, all you really need to do is create your ability scores, pick the number of hit dice for the monster. And then everything else is just filling in, what's the armor class? Well, what's your dexterity, right? Yeah. Is going to wear armor? Do you want to give it natural armor? I mean, you can do is just assign an armor class, right? Well, it's here's a creature I want to be really hard to hit, so I'll just make it AC 20, and then you just know, because with the idea, rather, since bonuses don't go up very quickly in 5th, an armor class of 20 is always a good armor class, whether it's low level characters or higher level characters. I mean, higher level characters will hit more often, but it's still a relatively high armor. So you don't have to think in terms of, well, since my party is 18th level, here's the number I should be using. It's more like, well, I know an armor class between 20 and 25 will always be hard to hit, especially for maybe the characters who aren't as focused on attacking. So yeah, the idea is a lot of the DMing stuff in 4th was usually some of the most popular parts of the system.
Oh, it was beautiful.
It was so much easier for people, so we tried to stay as close to that as possible.
Very good. Sounds very DM friendly, which is definitely a good thing. Couple more questions. I have one question about the Dungeons and Dragons Essentials tiles and the DU series and the 3rd edition series of tiles too. Will those be adaptable, or are we going to expect to see different tile sets coming out that are going to conform more to 5th edition?
Oh no, the tiles will still be. We will have rules. I think in the DMG, or maybe this might show up in the player's handbook too. I just can't remember off the top of my head. But we'll have rules for if you want to use a grid. We're still using the 1-inch grid, so those tiles will work. We don't have any plans for tiles right now, but that's obviously not set in stone. We don't have anything to announce there yet.
Gotcha.
But yeah, we know tiles were popular. Gale Force 9 is doing more of the vinyl poster maps they've done in the past. They're doing some of those for the Tyranny of Dragons campaign. Okay. But yeah, so the tile sets, if you're using tiles now, they'll be perfectly fine with it. We're not trying to tinker with the scale or anything like that. And the WizKids minis, the WizKids minis are the same scale as the D&D minis we did. So
okay. That was going to be my next question. Yeah, if the new blind packs, if you were going to have different series come out, that's whoa.
Oh wow, that
was pretty close. So yeah, I live in Florida, so this time of the year it is just nonstop lightning storms. So, but are there going to be plans to have multiple series come out for the new D&D miniatures line?
Yep. So the idea
sort of
is
like Chainmail and the old D&D line.
So the first set is linked to the Tyranny of Dragons campaign, and the idea is that when we do these campaigns, we have Tyranny of Dragons. We have the story after that is already actually complete. It's been done. Then the story after that is actually the one we're finishing now. We basically create these story Bibles, which basically summarizes okay, in this campaign, here are the main villains, here's the important treasure, and kind of here's the key things. And we take that and we hand it off to the team that's creating the RPG campaign at the same time as we give it to WizKids to do the miniatures. So the miniatures can come out at the same time as the campaign, and it's not a perfect match because in writing the campaign there might be some more NPCs they add in and monsters, but for the key things, the important creatures, like say the cultists of the dragon, some of the leaders of the dragon cult, both teams are starting with the same the names, the characters, what they look like and stuff. So when that set releases, you'll have a number of the key monsters will have miniatures that same day.
Very good.
So, and that's something we want to do going forward. Whenever we do these big campaigns, we'll work with WizKids to have the set. And again, it's not going to be a perfect alignment because as they're writing and WizKids is working, there's going to be some divergence. But the really key villains and monsters will line up.
Very good. Everybody's singing Thunderstruck in the chat. So, well. Last question that I have for you, and thank you so much again for taking the time to do this again and the sound technical difficulty of last week. But I asked you a question last week, and it was from several of the viewers last week, and the viewers want to know what Mike Mearls' favorite monster is.
So, and it's actually kind of cool because this is I shouldn't say it, but anyways, I love the Ogre Mage, and I don't know why I like the Ogre Mage so much, but there's something about this big brutish monster that's very tricky. You can shapeshift, you can cast spells,
Yeah.
and I